Ill-armed and untrained though they were, the people of Dwarven Doors rose against the orcs. Although their losses had been tremendous, never once did they break or falter. In the end, the orcish host was smashed and the survivors sent scurrying for their lives. Grief for the fallen could not suppress the people's joy in their newfound freedom. They ransacked the orcish storehouses, sang, danced and drank with abandon. New-fledged warriors boasted of their deeds in the battle, while the women and children looked on with awe. Amidst all the revelry, Tallin alone remained grave. He knew it likely that the orcs would return with a vengeance and slaughter every last one of them. The following morning, he gathered the cooler heads about him so they could set their next course. How might they, untrained in the art of war and without expectation of aid from the prosperous human lands of the south, defend themselves? The War Council's thoughts quickly turned to the dwarves, close allies in the past. However, nobody knew the state of things in the Knalgan tunnels. The bravest of scouts found in there the spore of many trolls and of creatures darker than trolls. It was even rumoured that the Dwarven dead from the invasion of Knalga had risen in unlife, roaming the tunnels to slay the living, fighting through all manner of unknown monsters in the mere hope of finding surviving dwarves held but little appeal. So the matter lay, and the peasants differed from one suggested plan of action to the next, never arriving at any conclusion. In the meantime, some help, unlooked for, arrived in the form of a small band of woods runners, escapees from the orcs, grown woodwise and crafty, and in contact with larger bands of poachers and outlaws roaming the night. Embassies were sent, agreements made, a handful of experienced fighters, scarred and closed-mouthed, came to Dwarven Doors to find and train the most willing in their rugged fighting style. A fortnight after the victory, the town was awakened from slumber in the dead of night by the distant booming of orcish drums. Scouts training with the Night Runners returned to cry the news that a strong orcish company was approaching. Frightened as they had never been before, the folk of Dwarven Doors looked to Tallin for guidance. Faced with certain destruction at the hands of the orcs, or a fate unknown in the caves of Knalga, Tallin chose the latter. The people quickly gathered together and collected whatever food and weapons they could, and plunged into the darkness of the caves. So welcome back to the Battle of Wesnoth. Selex is here, and so are we. Of course, we are untrained and unprepared for this kind of cave area. Unfortunately, his remark brings about a bat. Not the best start. So yeah, the goal of this particular scenario is to find the dwarves and, secondly, clear the caves. In this case, you'll actually start to realise how difficult this particular scenario actually is. As you can see, map area is pretty large. So, let's get started. Now, a thing that we have now is, since we celebrated victory and worried about the war and all that, we now have the ability to recruit new units. In particular, we have brought back some of these peasants, but of course we also have poachers and thugs. And in addition to that, we can recruit footpads as well. I think that's it. So yeah. And as you can see, there's plenty of teams to go around. And of course that one lone bat just decides to attack us. We'll be facing a lot worse soon enough. So yeah, we quickly claim a few villages, and you can see that the area to the east of where we start opens up quite a little bit, and there's nothing to us directly to the west except a few sunlit areas, useful for lawful units, but most of the stuff that we can recruit are, well, basically chaotic units, so they work better in the darkness. And we see the first of many enemies, which is a troll whelp. They're slightly less dangerous than their counterparts, which are a bit stronger. And they also don't throw things at us, so that's nice as well. So we're quickly gonna move around and bring some forces up there, but we've spotted another thing. Skeletons, yes. Apparently one of those skeletons must have been dwarves at some point. That being said, the game tells us it's an enemy unit, alright. There's enemies both to the northwest and southwest of us, so it's pretty important to get those areas out of the way as soon as possible. Otherwise you end up doing as I did and send a whole bunch of units in the wrong place at the wrong time. That being said, it doesn't stop me from trying to fight them. I prefer ranged combat over melee only in this particular case because of the particular attacks that they have, but that's about it really. The thugs are pretty useful against these troll whelps, since they hit like 4 attacks of 7, but that varies between resistances and as such. Of course the skeletons finally decide to attack us. That being said, most of our weapons are ineffective, save for those who have impact weapons like the footpads and the thugs. As you can see right then and there, you could see that their offense was pretty good. As always, terrain defense is very important, otherwise you'll get beaten pretty badly. Okay. So, I make the mistake of trying to push out into the middle area without thinking too much. I thought, you know, the whole idea of pushing ahead and trying to gain a footing in the middle area. I considered pushing Tallin out over there, but moving your leader unit is generally considered a poor idea. I like to keep him in the camp and just use him to employ other units to our cause. And as you can see, some of the troll units have decided to engage the skeletons. I probably should have taken a hint sooner, but not this time. I probably could have saved quite a bit of money if I'd been a little more careful with this. But let's move on. So you can see me trying to keep hold of the northwest and southwest ends of the map. Even though there are troll whelps going down either end, so it's not exactly the best thing in the world. But it's managing to hold them off, at least for now. But as you can see, the troll whelps are pretty strong even though they are level 1 units. As you can see, our fight in the south isn't exactly the best it could be. Ideally, I'd probably bring out more thugs and probably a footpad or 2. But seeing as they all have bows, they'd probably destroy us pretty badly if given the chance. The enemy AI tends to use the most effective means of attack, especially those of which you can't actually retaliate against. And so our turn continues, and we try and beat back the green team. Although faced by an assault on 3 sides, it's not the best thing in the world. And as well as that, you also have to contend with the fact that trolls can also regenerate health with every time it's their turn, so yeah. They basically don't need villagers at all, really. And so I think it might be a good idea to always just gang up on troll units, or units that have regeneration, because you want to take them down one at a time, else, you know, multiple injured units get healed up. You can't really do much about that. As you can see, even the level 2 units are struggling, since the method of attack is not really effective against them. Still, you can see quite a bit of conflict between the skeletons and the undead, and, well, not the undead, the skeletons against the trolls. It seems we came in at a crucial time where we awoke everything, and now there's this huge battle between the bunch. That being said, we still have plenty of gold from the first campaign, or scenario rather, to carry us through this. However, I do believe we actually do run out in this case. Even at the normal difficulty, it's still insanely hard. Or at least very challenging if you don't know exactly what's going to happen. My thoughts on the skeletons and the trolls, well, basically the trolls are probably going to win most of the time. Although they do have the disadvantage of having limited attacks per round. They can do pretty heavy dealing stuff if they actually hit, which is, well, a good deal of the percentage. Much like you can hit with thugs and expect to do a bunch of damage, they will do a lot of damage to you if they make contact. They also regenerate, and they also tend to gain experience a lot quicker for some reason. At least when it comes to the whole idea. I suppose their initial toughness is a pretty significant barrier. That being said, the only real weakness is the terrain defense, as well as their lack of attacks per whatever attack they decide to use. They don't really have the disadvantage in the caves of mobility, however. They can get around pretty well. Makes me wish we had some dwarves on our side, but that's not happening anytime soon. The orange team seems to be pulling out a lot of units from somewhere. I do believe it's one of the last teams that we actually defeat. We continue our barrage in the southwestern ends and northwestern ends. We also recruit more units, because we are getting them killed, unfortunately, and it's just inevitable that that will happen. I do try to pull them out when they get too injured, but sometimes you just have to keep going. Luckily, at the northwest and southwestern ends there are a few ruined castles. Despite being ruined, they still provide quite a bit of terrain defense, should we need it. Unfortunately, the same applies to the enemy. You know, I'm kind of surprised sometimes that when the AI decides to miss or gets a perfect set of attacks without missing once. It makes me want to consider testing out the whole idea, or rather the whole engine, how fair it actually is, but you know, statistics, they probably can't work out for you all the time, because, you know, randomization. A 60-40 might not necessarily be 60% and 40%. If it was perfect, then you'd know something was wrong. Unfortunately, some of the enemy team are pushing back at us now, and it seems like some of the undead are striking the brown team leader, who has his keep right off to the eastern side of the map. Directly east from us, actually. That being said, since he is a troll, he can recover HP every turn, so that's just great. While it might seem that the skeleton undead units are doing pretty well, they'll probably get crushed. They have to at some point. As you can see, impact attacks do pretty well. The thugs have a whole bunch of times they can actually attack, so they're pretty useful for winding everything down. For level 1 units, they're pretty good, but, you know, they still get beat down if you're not being careful, especially like I am here. As you can see, the attack of that leader unit, the troll warrior, is pretty heavy. Since they have melee impact moves, they can be particularly effective against skeletons, but the large amount of damage that they do makes them effective against us as well. As you can see, we can continue the assault, and gradually we'll begin to break through. Despite us having limited gold and actively running out of it at the same time, but we have enough villagers to keep our upkeep going, so we have a bit of money even though we're losing it through the recruitment process and getting them killed. So eventually these enemy teams will have to fall back eventually, they'll wear themselves out from recruiting too much. Unfortunately, the orange team, I do believe, is one of the few exceptions to that rule. Getting that village is pretty useful if you want to keep a foothold, but unfortunately I get a little reckless. Sometimes I do think it may be better just to wait for them to attack you first rather than the other way around. That way you're not injured when you get there to hold the position, and then heal up on the next turn after their attack is done. As you can see, their numbers are thinning pretty well actually. There's only 3-4 units there, there's only 2 units down there. That being said, our push into the center area is still doing abysmally. In hindsight, I probably should have just stuck around the opening to it rather than charging straight into the middle of it. There's nothing we can do about that though, so whatever. So yeah, I'm gradually pulling back to try and just keep a line at this area, but you also have to worry about this area as well, and this particular area up here. as we try and make our advances in both directions at once. Multitasking, not the greatest of things. Especially trying to maintain a front at 2 ends. 3 ends, really. Still, the thugs are pretty solid fighters. As you can see, they tend to deal quite a bit of damage, even against the troll whelps. And so the struggle continues. This whole issue is due to how the zone of control works. At least the area that you control is dictated basically by the enemy, and you kind of have to work with it. As you can see, they can get pretty wrecked if you don't really know what you're doing, which is what I was doing in this case. That being said, I'm still pushing on even though I only have 195 gold. A little bit of healing is provided when your units stay still and don't do anything at all, which can be useful if you don't have any villagers nearby, but I probably should have made a more wiser move to move them to a village and get them healed at 8, then 10 hit points per turn afterwards. Because movement, yes, affects how much you heal by if you want to heal. In terms of healers in this scenario, there are very few healer units. Most of them are actually story characters that can die permanently out of the story, so yeah, it's a very big thing to deal with. That being said, at this point I probably should have realised that trying to push out into the centre was a big mistake. Probably. That being said, I don't think there was much I could do about it. I mean, if I'd yelled at myself for trying to execute such a rather backwards-sided tactic, I'd probably not listen to it. Even though I have played this before. So we've finally broken through the area to the northwest area. And you see there's a rather interesting village out in the greenery. We'll go check that out next turn. If I do recall correctly, we used nearly all of the moves in this. And unfortunately for us, that particular troll leveled up to become another troll warrior, as if we didn't have enough already. That being said, hopefully they'll attack the skeleton units rather than us. I doubt it though. Even if you have optimal positioning, you somehow manage to lose it anyway. But that's the name of the game. And we have found ourselves a guy called Cameron, who has immediately mistaken us for an orc. Apparently this guy's been hiding out here for a long time. That being said, I guess he burns everyone so no one knows he's actually hiding in there. Not sure where he's getting his food from, probably magic. Apparently he seems very eager to burn things up. That being said, he does have magic. And it does 12 per hit, and since it's a magic move, it has a 70% chance to hit. So, yeah, he's a pretty good unit. so don't get him killed. It's ideal that you don't get him killed, especially. Unfortunately, you know, anything can happen to him as he's still human. He can't heal himself. And as such, we have to use all the old methods of keeping our units alive, and that is sticking to villagers. That being said, that doesn't happen yet where I need him to pull back for safety. Now that most of our units are now killed, most of the fight's been brought out into the middle between the skeletons and the trolls. Until we finally break through to Blue Team's stronghold, and all of their villages, and all of their things. That being said, I think we're going to just about be ready to push through into Green Team's territory as well, once we deal with this bunch. Unfortunately, they still can recruit more units. Of course, since we have the thugs at the front, we don't have any real defense against those archers, still. And our footpads aren't exactly the most useful people either. They can do 2 attacks, ranged or melee, but that's about it. And our dedicated ranged weaponry won't work here as effectively. We begin our assault on the northwest end, and we continue our battle to the southwest, as always. And I'm trying to establish some form of defensive line. And since that particular footpad was injured, I sent them off to the western end, trying to spot where the dwarves went. They move pretty fast, even in the cave areas, so moving is a pretty good idea. That being said, getting hit once brought HP basically to 1. Or 3. Still enough to die to whatever comes next, if anything does. Trying to stand my ground in the village, but you know, probably isn't going to work, especially if you're surrounded by archers on 2 sides. During the assault on the southwestern end, we leveled up our thug to become a bandit, which is always nice. Until we come across an ancient door after dealing with Blue Team and all of their units. And it seems that they had an ancient door that no one ever bothered to open. Apparently it was a stuck door. And so it's just a matter of kicking it down and breaking through. And we seem to have found White Team, or Grey Team's base, which is all great, since we can actually deal with them. Unfortunately, our footpad is trapped between 2 units on opposite ends, neither of which are, well, really for us. They'll want to kill us instead. But it's just something we'll have to deal with. Still trying to push through. We seem to have opened up a very little path, so I take the opportunity to try and push. Since Tallin doesn't move very well since he's still a peasant, a level 0 unit, I just grab some of the offensive units to try and move through to neutralize the White Team. Until our footpad dies. and it seems there's a bit of a corridor to the southeast end of this map. Having finally put up a line, we're still getting battered pretty badly from the ranged units, so I've brought a lot of thugs and footpads along to try and handle them. They're pretty much ignoring this door opening over here, luckily. Otherwise they'd be all over us right about now. Oh well. We have a magic unit, we can use him. I just clean up with a couple of the thugs to claim some of the villagers. Try to take up some tactical positions to try and minimise the amount of times we actually get hit. Of course, it doesn't mean that the skeletons will stop attacking us, however. So of course I take use of Cameron's magical abilities to deal with some of the skeleton units. It doesn't stop me from trying to injure all the other units though. We claim another little bit of castle area to keep our defense up, even as we set ourselves on the offense. Given enough turns, you will probably be able to break through. As you can see, despite all the battle that's been going on, this particular unit still is nowhere near dying, thanks to the regeneration ability. One of our soldiers just got killed by the leader unit, who has stepped out of his keep. Big mistake. Try and bring him down before finishing off with magic, which can only be countered by a pretty cheap crossbow. I assume that the undead don't really have much of the ability to maintain weapons, rather than just to utilise the ones that they had when they died. Even so, we're still taking losses, although not as much as before. It seems that the trolls are pretty interested in something down to the southwest end of the map. Our footpad died, so we never really got to find out what that was. It's just a matter of cleanup for the rest of White Team now that the leader unit is gone. It's also a matter of keeping our defences up, since we're getting pretty beat, even from the orange team. We finally find ourselves upon the green team leader, and it's up to some of our units to try and get inside. The zone of control from the troll whelps keeps us from getting too close, unfortunately. So the battle continues. Still got plenty where that came from. Even so, throw some stuff at them, just to keep a line, try and maintain a line, and deal with the rest of the green team, retreating some of the injured units back while bringing in fresh ones. Even so, it's starting to look a little vicious some of the units at least. A level 3 unit is considered probably like pretty close to the top, if not already the best unit possible. From a level 1 unit even. Cameron is a level 2 unit, so leveling him up is pretty important. That being said, he is a magic user, so he'll take quite a bit of time to level up. I just sent Cameron back to one of the villages to get him healed and also claim more money for us so we can keep recruiting. The trolls seem to have taken their focus away from us and decided to go after the skeletons instead. Which is nice because it thins out the numbers pretty quickly if they hit. If they hit. The emphasis being on if. That being said, we're nearly through the green team's blockade. And we've claimed a whole bunch of money from the where white team once was. But they're gone. They still do a mean bit of damage though, even despite terrain defense. That being said, Orange team's still managing to recruit a whole lot of units from somewhere. I guess to have enough villagers to maintain that kind of spending spree. An interesting thing about Green Team's unit placement right about now is that the leader is not actually on the keep, so my guess is that they've run out of money, but, you know, while keep on the offensive side, so you attack directly for your leader unit. That kind of thing isn't generally advisable unless your leader unit has actually leveled up. And this would nearly be impossible since Tallin only has 22 health. So probably one round of an attack by one of these trolls would probably kill him. So it's safer to use him as he is intended to, as a unit to recruit more. They just don't ever stop coming, do they? Thankfully, they're not really focused on attacking us right now, except with Green Team, of course. That being said, the Green Leader team is nowhere to be seen, and oh look, Dwarves! It only took them 36 turns to get here. So now we have another team that is finally on our side for once. Which is a nice thing to have since we are being pretty battered right now. We're in a bit of a rough state. Even now, the trolls have decided to take their anger out on us, even as we hold the wall. That being said, we're still able to beat most of them back since we have the initial attack, and most of the time we'll have better terrain defense than them, but the fact they have more HP makes up for it. So it's time to bring out some more thugs and more poachers. And now the Dwarven team will move in from the southwestern end, where half the undead were some time ago, but seem to have died out. Now it's just a matter of cleaning up most of this stuff. They could probably handle Brown team, it's just a matter of us getting through to the other teams as well. And so we move Cameron out from the northern end, and just get him into the rest of the battle. As you can see, there are 3 types of Dwarven units, at least for now from what we can see. Dwarvish fighters have 2 types of melee attacks, blade attacks with their axe and impact attacks with their hammer. You also have these Dwarvish guardsmen, who are pretty interesting units. They have a pretty poor terrain defense on most of the terrain outside, but since they have steadfast, they can increase their terrain defense if they're being attacked, up to 50% I believe. That being said, they don't really do too well on the offense at this stage. And finally we have the Dwarvish Thunderer, which is basically a dwarf with a gun. Of course. Fantasy world, of course. That being said, they only get 1 shot at it, so it's kind of similar to how the trolls have an attack as well. That being said, it's pretty good when it hits, but otherwise it's not so good when it doesn't hit, because if they can counter, they will counter. Dealing with some of the skeletons, but, you know, want to wipe out everything in general, so now we can finally start pushing through the center area again. And just like we found the hidden door on the northwestern end, we found one on the southwestern end. And as always, it's stuck, so they never really figured out how to open them. Who would have thought that the enemy teams would be so close to each other, yet a door that they couldn't open and never bothered with would be the key to the victory. The Doors can handle the Brown team. That being said, I still send a couple of units after them just in case. It's just a matter of us getting the ground to put Orange team in their place. Going through the ancient door, the southwestern end exposes a rather interesting river system that isn't elsewhere on the map. That being said, despite the slight limitation of movement, you can still get your units through there. As you can see, the Thunderer managed to hit that time round, and it did quite a bit of damage against the Troll Warrior. And I'm just pouring water for myself. Even so, the Trolls continue their assault on us, and so you still have to deal with them. Although, seeing the other team gives you a bit of morale. It's like, you've been here for 36 turns? Sure, let's bring in some allies. As you can see, we finally spotted where the orange units are coming from after all. They didn't seem too interested in the southwestern end of the map, so finding them there is, well, a bit of a discovery really. As you can see, the dwarves are pretty much overwhelming the entirety of Brown team, so it's up to us to deal with Orange team. Still recruiting more units than ever, even though we're getting closer and closer. And thus, the enemy leader, Death Knight, just like the white team, That being said, we still have to deal with most of these units. Try and level them up where possible. Try to avoid getting them killed where possible. Well, yeah, another dwarf unit I haven't talked about is this Dwarf Scout. They tend to have a lot of movement points that they can go a whole bunch of places, even though they have pretty much the same terrain weaknesses as most dwarves do, especially on flat ground or grasslands or forest terrain. They do much better in the mountains and in caverns. Trying to keep up our frontal assault, which is pretty easy to do considering that they don't regenerate, skeletons don't regenerate, so we could just break through to hit them head on without fear of having to lose out on any damage that we did the previous turn. That being said, I wish the dwarves came a little bit sooner to offer us a bit of aid, but that's not really gonna happen. So we finally cleared up the brown team, and now it's just left to us to defeat the orange team, do a bit of exploration, take the villages, get an early turn finish bonus, get some gold. Since we used up pretty much all of it during this scenario, well, I believe we had 1,000 at the start, but now it's just 277. So it's good to have the gold. There's a slight bit of hindrance in the southwestern end here, because they've decided to move towards us, but that's really all there is to it. There's no real problem to it. Since we've planted most of our units on the villages, we don't have to worry about them losing too much HP, since they can heal up every turn. That being said, I am curious as to what all these dwarves are suddenly doing now. They're just kind of wandering about without any real direction, since they don't really have much to target anymore. And that is because we're standing right in front of the only other enemy unit leader. Nearly have orange team finished up with. I decided to move Cameron around, just get him a bit of an angle so he's not immediately exposed to the enemy, that way he can move in with his magical attacks. You can see why I did that though. Finally get around to dealing with the rest of the enemy team units. Trying to random stopping the enemy from recruiting any more enemy forces to fight on his side. His or her. Don't know what stories are told of the undead. That being said, still has the gall to try and recruit one more unit. And we finally finish him off. And for that we have finally managed to clear the caves. And now we can get some better weapons and some more training and all that stuff. And so that does it for the Infested Caves. Join us next time, whatever it is that we do. I do believe we are heading out to clear out even more caves. But that is for another video and another time. So thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.